Well, good morning, church. You can't, Carolyn, I don't know if you're kind of feeling the same thing. Like in the last month or so, I've been working with pastors and churches in South Dakota. 2 weeks ago, we were in Statesville, North Carolina. But it's like coming in here and worshiping with you all and seeing you all. It's like there's no place like home. And it's like looking at the people, like some of us have been together for 30 years or whatever. Mark, 42 years, we have been together. I want to say, too, it's so great to worship with you at home. I know several of you texted me and said you're worshiping at home today. And today is a communion week, so if you will, at home, find whatever. God uses whatever. If it was crackers and water or orange juice or whatever, we're going to take communion together in a little bit. So we start with the written word, and then in communion, we move to the living word. Now, I've noticed as I age, to age is one thing, to get old is all another, right? So we age, but we don't want to get old. So I'm 70 now, so I noticed at certain ages, like yearly checkups become more important. Like what they used to say for men at 50, now 45 on checkups. And then by the time you're my age, cardiologist, all that, and they get real specific. If you're over 65 now, did you notice when you go for your annual checkup, they just say 3 words, and then you repeat the 3 words, And then after your checkup, they say repeat those 3 words. I said, who have any of you noticed this yet? Gary, you're not going to the doctor enough. They're checking your mental kind of abilities. I messed it up the last time, but I messed it up when I was in school. So, and dermatologist, and they get so specific. They wear those little kind of special kind of glasses, and I'm glad they do, because this guy had one of those basal cell cancers right there that I'm going to have surgery on next month. And dentist, here's my dentist, like I said, for 42 years. And Mark, as I got older, now you promised me when we were in our late 20s that I would still have my teeth at this age. Do you remember? And I do. But now it's getting, it's so specific that the last time, you need a root canal. Now I've had 2 of those. And probably more crowns in my mouth. Can I have a witness from anybody in the room? Now, I believe it is just as important for physical health that we do a yearly checkup, and I've done this for years in this church, that we do a yearly checkup on our physical health. Because how we live, spend, and give matters to God. And you really see it in how many times Jesus talked about our money and possessions. As a matter of fact, out of his 38 parables, 16 dealt with our money and possessions. Now, one of the things I want to point out is I see one of the things after this pandemic, there's a lot of young pastors leaving the ministry. We saw Rusty right out, here of our own church. And one of the frustrations that young pastors are feeling is they feel like the people in the seats, they're not seeing the fruit, because we have confused the difference between believing in Jesus and having faith in Jesus. See, believing in Jesus is acknowledging what Jesus taught, but faith is when you put it into practice. That's the difference. Belief, I acknowledge it, right? But faith is when you practice it. So if you have your Bibles open to Matthew 25 this morning, Matthew 25, I'll give you a moment. You can do it on your cell phones or wherever. Like I always say, I like to go old school and even have my Bible rebound when I wear out my bindings, because I take so many notes. But this is a parable of bags of gold. Now, some translations say talents, but a talent, we think of a talent, what do we think of? Gifts that we have, skills that we have, they're all different. Any of you watch the World Series? Down there in the mountains, they went crazy over Atlanta winning the World Series. Some of those pitchers, I can't believe throwing the ball. You played baseball for years, over 100 miles an hour. It's amazing that people even see that stuff. That's not my skill or talent. We think of it that way, but talent in the Bible was a measure of gold, is what a talent was. So some of yours say talent, which is the real Greek word. Mine translates gold. Now here's the parable. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. I want you to see that. Entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag. We don't all have the same abilities to earn or the talents is to produce. That's okay. Each according to his ability. Then he went on a journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gave 5 bags more. Now, whose money was it? Group participation time. That's okay. In the church, if we can't deal with the crying baby, we're family. So don't worry about it. It's what I've always liked about this place. So what we do is, whose money is it? Right, it's the owner who represents God. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more, but the man who received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now, the biggest thing we see in this parable is that we are entrusted to manage, and it's not our money we're managing. And the owner, in the parable, but it represents God, expects a return on the owner's investment. Now, we all have different abilities and different incomes. I've shared this story before, but when I was in 7th grade, a woman in our church named Mrs. Cook rented a bus and took us, a brand new seminary opened in Columbus. It was called Methodist Theological School in Ohio, and took us to Columbus. Now, I'm in 7th grade. Any of you in this room work with children? You do. It's important, the words we speak over our children. And when I was in 7th grade, you know the story. I was a poor student and, everything else. I had a low self-esteem. So we go to this seminary. It was my first exposure to anything like that. I'm in 7th grade. I'm not thinking of seminaries. And then we went over to Riverside Hospital in Columbus, which is a Methodist hospital. And she said to me, now this is 7th grade, she says, when you grow up, you either have to be a minister or a doctor. Now that was so prophetic. Dan, you had this picture for me? So here's my son who became the doctor, and I'm the minister. Well, I don't have his skill. He had smart and math and science and all that kind of stuff. I flunked Algebra 2 twice. But that became so prophetic. Now, I can't compare by any means my skills or talents, or definitely income levels. A surgeon and very different, but we can't make comparisons. We're not responsible for the resources we don't have, but to effectively sow to God's purpose what God has entrusted to our hands. Does that make sense what I'm saying, my brothers and sisters? We reap what we sow. That's such an important concept in Scripture. We reap what we sow. Now look at verses 24 and 25 in that chapter with me, 24 and 25. Now, the one guy who had 5 bags of gold made 5 more. The other 2 made 2 more. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. So when we're born, God has given you life. God has given you gifts. And that life and gifts are to be invested for God's purpose on earth. That's why God has put us here, sisters and brothers. Jesus said, you didn't choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit. Now get this, fruit that will live beyond you. You've heard me say it a million times. It's only what we do for God and others that live beyond us. So if all we do, eventually, brother, we're going to bury your behind in the ground. And if there's not produce, kingdom produce, it's been wasted for the master. So folks, it's important that we deal with the detailed monthly budget. That's what it means to manage. And I want to show you an example. I think we have it here on the screen. Now, this came in a book that Karen and I wrote last year. We gave everyone a copy who was here. The Christian Wallet, Living, Giving, and Spending with a Conscience. Here's just an example of expenses. 1, housing, utilities, medical, groceries. I mean, how much you're going to spend each month. Dining out. I remember one time when our daughter went to college, I said, let's go up to Coldwater Cafe. And you said, we have $18 left in our monthly budget. Well, we better hit McDonald's. See, we don't just go because we want to go. And now way back in our 20s, we called it the envelope system, and we literally had cash and envelope. Now we use Quicken. How many of you use Quicken on? Yeah, now we use Quicken. Clothing. Why I laugh about that was when I was going to buy clothing, Carolyn said, well, how are you going to pay for that? I said, Carolyn, we have, in the bank. Doesn't matter how much we have in the bank. This is what we have in our monthly budget. I'm glad she's been that way in August, we've been married 50 years. It's been matter of fact, June 5th, I'm preaching here because it is the date. It's my 50th anniversary of active ministry on June 5th. Transportation, entertainment. Do you see? And that includes like media subscriptions. How many, on cable TV, and then all of a sudden you notice your bill's gone up? Call them and tell them they're going to drop it. And they give you the next special for the next year. How many of you have been practicing? Gary, you've been doing that? Entertainment, any kind of subscriptions, haircuts. I do my own. I used to go when I had some hair to Terry Dara, a precious sister who passed this past year. And I'd say, what kind of blade are you using on that? And she told me, well, number 2. So I went out and bought a barber in our church, gave me a razor, and so it's a lot less expensive now. One thing that is not on here is vacation. And so budget for vacation, it's like, how did we end up building a cabin in the mountains? Because early in ministry, what we had in our envelope was enough for 2 nights and 3 days in Gatlinburg. Do you see what I'm trying to say? We didn't borrow so we could do one of those Disney cruises and then pay 24 to 27% interest. Do you hear what debt is not our friend. So debt reduction is another thing that we need on our monthly budgets. And it's amazing when we paid off our house, that was like a raise. One of the other things we did is, helping our kids through college. When they were through college, that was like a raise. Our last dog died in 2009. Do you still have a Luca account in Quicken? Oh, you don't have that anymore? But for several years, it was like, here's Luca's account, and it was like money where we needed it that we could use. Now remember, it's not our money. We're entrusted to manage this, so it's very important that we have a detailed monthly budget. Now, see your budget as a moral document. So remind yourself, whose money is it that I'm spending? I'm not perfect in this, my sisters and brothers. I still have stuff I don't need, Like, I like those $100 and some $1,000 Mercedes sports cars. So I bought a 2006 for $17,000. They do depreciate. So do I need? No. So don't look at this whole thing as being perfect, but look at it as discipline. And remind yourself, whose money is it you're spending? What are God's priorities in my spending? Consider fair trade. Like, is this being done by slave labor? We were down with family at our mountain home, and we were talking, man, I got these Wrangler jeans for $40. Isn't that a great deal? And then I looked, and it was made in Bangladesh. Now, here's the problem. Since the economy has gone up in China, people are making better wages, so products are costing more from China. Now they move to Bangladesh, some of our businesses, where things are made virtually with slave labor, where people are making $2 or $3 to work 12-hour kind of days. So, what are God's priorities? The food I buy for my family, is it healthy? We've got to ask these kind of questions. How are we dealing with debt? Now, remember, Dan, I talked to you about this the other day. You told me you're 38. So 50 is coming soon. Who can bear witness? Like, I'm 70 and I'm going, how did this happen? Right? How old are you guys now? 55. Brother, you're going to remember this. You're going to be 70 tomorrow. It happens that quick. But listen to this. I got this out of the Cincinnati Enquirer on the 24th of October. The age group over 50 is the fastest growing with student loan debt. 8.7 million Americans over 50 still have student loan debt. And I can tell you right now, I see pastors retiring at 65, 66 with student loan debt. As a matter of fact, this group, over 50s, debt load has increased 50% since 2017. The over 50 group. Now, that age group, 50 to 61, the average debt, not counting mortgage, is $43,000. We got to dump this stuff, folk. I would be in trouble living now. My pension for 45 years is $33,000 a year. That's I would be in huge trouble right now. Age group over 62 is $39,000 in debt, not counting pension. Now, you've always, and again, this is our yearly. I noticed this is my 4 years out of Ginghamsburg Church. They always have me back to do this month, to do the annual fiscal checkup. So I always taught this, and it's because I was mentored at this at age 24 to Mike do the 10-10-80. 10-10. The first 10% goes to God. So our 10% tithe comes to Ginghamsburg Church. But because we have practiced these biblical principles, another whole tithe goes to pay a young girl, at-risk family, to junior college total tuition for the first 2 years and books. That's another tithe. And then a half tithe goes to my seminary. Do you see this idea? It's not my money, I'm imagining. The owner wants a return. So the first 10 goes there. We've been practicing this since our 20s. The second 10% goes into retirement. I started this at age 24. Don Joy told me this. He said, Mike, if you're going to seem like, I know you're making $7,000 and some dollars out of seminary as a pastor, if you do $80 a month, it has to be a month, not $1,000 and then a year, for 40 years, an average 12% return, and over 40 years, that's true, that'll be $1 million. So I started practicing that at age 24. And the thing is, when you get older then, and the kids are through college, you were sitting there the last time I taught. I want to tell you this, God's got a plan for your life. I saw that the last time I was here. I saw God's hand on you. So God's going to do something big in your life. You hear what I'm saying? So where was I? Seeing God's hand on that young man's life, man. So what we need to do is figure when we get older and the kids are through college, it's not $80 a month you're putting in. This is why debt is not our friend. And any of you young people in this room now, old people too, but man, don't get into, like my kids go to college and all of a sudden they get like 5 credit card offers and they're 18 years old. They want to hook you. So then my son gets through college, never had a credit card, and then he does a year mission, and then he does 2 years teaching. He applies for a credit card, and they say, you can't have a credit card. You're like 25. You're a poor risk. How am I a poor risk? You're not going to use it. So your dad has to sign for you. Never sign. I'll never sign for my children's. Do you hear? You can get in trouble, for doing that. I just called the bank and said, my money's with you. My son needs a credit card. I'm not signing. He got the credit card. So then 80, so 10, you never touch that 10 for retirement. You never touch, no, you can't take it out of the bank to pay for college. You getting this? You still have someone going to college? They're all out? You're out? What happened to you? You were like this when I left. What do you do?
I just graduated at Ohio State about a year ago.
What's your major?
International business.
International business? That's great. We used people like you on our staff when we were doing the Sudan project. So that 80%, everything comes out of that 80%, including saving for your kids' college, education, whatever. So you live off that 80, and the 10 goes first to God's purpose, sowing to God's purpose, second 10 to your retirement. And at 70, I can bear witness. It works. It works. So what we have to focus on, sisters and brothers, is how are we growing that eternal portfolio? Now, the last part of this chapter is powerful because it shows that God's going to judge us according to our response to human need. Look with me when you're in there. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and the angels with him, all of the nations will be gathered. He's going to separate the sheep from the goats. We want to be on the sheep side of things. And he said, then the king will say to those on his right, come you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Mark, I know, I talk about this around the country, that how you do those free days for anyone who needs dental care. That you understand that the money you invested in Jamaican ministry down there and paid to take staff with you and even had my wife pull teeth. Do you remember that, Mark? You would loosen them and Carolyn would get to pull them. But you see, it's only what we do for God and others. My favorite verse is the 40th verse, where the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of these, least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." God will judge us according to our response to human need. Dan, don't you have some pictures of some of the stuff we've done here? Our ministry in Sudan, it was absolutely amazing. I heard on national news that Americans have raised $1.9 million for, where's the starvation happening right now? Madagascar. And I looked at Carolyn and I said, can you believe the people at Ginghamsburg raised $10 million for these Sudan projects? I went 3 times to witness the miracle. You built 294 schools. First schools for women. Remember, these are Muslim people. You did a water projects that brought water. Do you have more pictures than this? Okay, water projects. You're getting ready. Well, you've done much already, but these recent hurricanes in Louisiana, this year's Christmas miracle offering, and you're going to hear much more about this. Dan, you were down shooting video last week. Anywhere there's human need, God will judge us based on a response to human need. Well, my sisters and brothers, life is so short. You know, I always said, man, I'm almost dead. And Larry, right, that's you over there? Don't bury it in the ground. Don't bury it in the ground. There's no such thing as retirement from God's mission, sisters and brothers.